Hi, I'm Laura Klopp, and in this podcast, Creating Safe Schools, I'll be exploring ways that teachers and administrators can make their schools as safe, welcoming, and affirming as possible. I'll interview members of the LGBTQ community to allow them to share their experiences and to allow us as allies to learn from them. I'll talk with legal experts, administrators, teachers, and we'll hear from the students themselves. Together, we can do our part to ensure that every student at school feels safe, confident, and secure. For more information on this topic, visit creatingsafeschools.com. Welcome. This is part 2 of my interview with Chantelle Hansen, a GSA sponsor in Nevada. So I'm going to transition a little bit. I'm in Florida. So I've interviewed a lot of students here talking about the new Don't Say Gay law and how it affects them personally, because I think a lot of people quickly point out, oh, it's very vague. Oh, it doesn't actually say that. And yet there's this lack of substance to it, but at the same time it's punitive, and at the same time it is clearly saying certain topics are not school appropriate, which, just like you said with this boy who pulled out the flag, it's who I am. You're telling kids who you are is not school appropriate. There's an age level at which you are just not an appropriate person to talk about, or your family is not appropriate to talk about. And so obviously it's being fought in court. And I firmly believe that, given like the Bostock case gives me a lot of hope, because Bostock versus Clayton County in the Supreme Court, where Title VII protections for gender were found to protect LGBTQ people. And I'm thinking that will also be applicable to Title IX and the 14th Amendment, because it's still gender protection. So we'll see how that goes. But does Nevada have any similar legislation coming down the pike or recently passed?
I think that we're going to see parents trying. We are definitely, I think, when it comes to diversity, we have some pretty solid laws to protect people. Unfortunately, I think those laws are going to be challenged. Seeing the craziness at our school board meetings and these people, excuse me, that they just hear it on the news and they pick up on something and it gives them something to be passionate about. We don't have any laws yet. We're pretty, we have a Democrat for governor, but I am concerned that is going to change in the next election. And we have more people that remind me of, like Marjorie Taylor Greene out there being very vocal. I worry about that. Right now I feel like our kids are protected. But there are people trying to ban certain books, and there are, you're going to have that group of people, and they're louder than my affiliation is. And I think that's one of the things that sets us apart, is they're louder. It's not that there's more of them, they're just louder. And so I'm not sure. Right now I feel pretty comfortable, but I'm concerned in our next election that may change. And it's because these are buzzwords, the transgenders in sports. Utah passed a law recently banning kids from playing in trans, and it affects 4 children. That's it. It affects 4 children in Utah, and we are willing to make these laws. I can't even imagine being that child. How horrifying to have a law that affects just you. And it's because people are loud and they're uneducated and they're afraid. And
I'm trying to think. I think it was Ohio. I'll have to look it up and I'll put it in the notes section. But one Republican governor, I believe his veto was overridden, but one Republican governor recently vetoed such a law, and basically
I know, I can't remember what state either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
yes.
He said, I see no reason to believe there's even a need for this law. Like this is addressing a problem that doesn't exist, was pretty much his statement. And that is the thing that you can't tell me that the acceptance and the sense of teamwork and camaraderie and everything else that comes with sports, that allowing transgender students onto teams, those few who are affected, like, really doesn't outweigh like some perceived, like, I don't understand the balance where people think that that's such a necessary and so necessary. They're, it's the hate, it's the need for hate. I will
Yeah.
continue as I do this to just be constantly befuddled by, like, I had an ad out, just a little, like, for my podcast. Do you want to hear, or how does Florida's new Don't Say Gay law affect LGBTQ youth? Here in their own words. Just put it out there. Facebook then said, well, it's a political thing. You have to prove who you are. So that's fine. I'm in the process of doing that. So they took it down until I can send them stuff that proves that I'm a real person and not a foreign person trying to stir up. It's fine. I totally think that's a good thing to have. But it was up for maybe 6 or 8 hours before they caught that and took it down. And in that period of time, I got some really hateful comments and responses, like, there is no Don't Say Gay law, and then the profanity. And I am so befuddled as to why people are so angry about this topic that doesn't affect anybody except the people whose lives it is. It's not like LGBTQ people are knocking on your door and stealing your children. I mean, they're not hurting anyone in any way.
And you're not going to become gay because you stand next to them, like they're literally, I think they're afraid of those kind of things. Yes.
But then why? But that doesn't make any sense, because people who are gay didn't become straight with all of the straight characters they saw through the years and all the straight teachers they had. I'm like, logic there.
I have real concerns. It's because it's easy to just grab onto something. Again, I'll go back to social media, and the dangers of it is, first of all, you can say those things and there's no repercussions on the other end. You don't have to see their faces. You don't have to see someone you hurt. You just get to say it. And then that's it. You don't have to go back and do anything. There is no, and I think that's made it an avenue for people to maybe, what we once thought what once people thought in their heads, they can now say out loud, and there's zero repercussions. They don't have to go back and look at any of your responses. If they choose not to. So it's so much easier to have someone tell us. I worry about humans a little bit, because it's hard to go investigate. It's hard to learn something. It requires effort and changing our minds. And I can go into the psychology of the brain differences between Republicans and Democrats, and there's all those things out there. It's easier to just say, yeah, that's the way it is, instead of going, hey, maybe I should look into this, and maybe that doesn't sound quite right. And we don't like to do that as humans. I really don't think we do. I think we just, if people affirm how we feel, then that's great. And I'm going to continue to feel that way. And I think that people do the hate because they're unwilling to go and make the effort, because it requires effort. This has been a big struggle for me. I always tell my students, it's not difficult. It just requires effort, and they can't distinguish between the two anymore. And so anything that requires effort is too hard. And so I'm just going to accept the status quo, and I'm just going to accept that this is a bad thing. And why would I spend my time? And so now I'm going to reaffirm my beliefs and my decisions. And I don't have to, because it's right, all here in front of me. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, totally.
I think that's why the hate continues, because it's easier to hate than to go out and seek a way to change our minds and to seek out, because then we would have to admit to ourselves, maybe we were wrong, and humans don't like to do that. So I'll just stick with what I know.
Well, and also I think that the hate reinforces the hate, because if you're surrounded by people who hate, and if you decide suddenly you don't hate, then you have to be the person who says to all these other people who hate, oh, I don't hate that anymore. And then they're all going to be like, well, what are you, stupid? Or why don't you hate that anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Or, and suddenly you're going to earn that same wrath or disdain that you've placed upon others by the people
Mm-hmm.
that your community. And so I think it can be hard and it can be brave to leave that community and that mindset, because those who do are not only maybe admitting they were wrong, but they're also opening themselves up to attacks by the very people who've maybe been their support system.
Yeah. It's really too hard to change. It really is. Changing is hard. Um, and again, social media reinforces all the things they've been feeling. So they must be right. I mean, if all these people think this, then how can I be wrong? You know, and so it just reinforces their beliefs, and it just continues them on that path of hate. As a history teacher, kids always ask me this, well, how could they do that? I said, I wish I could answer those questions for you, but I can't. I know a lot about psychology, and I know a lot about, social psychology and things, but I still can't answer those questions for you. And I have no, I'm just here to give you, tell you the story, and you draw your own conclusions. And that's what I hope you can do. But I can't answer your question as to why humans do the things they do. And they want the answers. So when they do find something, that gives them an answer, but I can't ever tell them, we've just been recently, I talk about with Russia and everything, and the Ukraine famine, and we spent some time on that. The kids were like, how come we've never heard of this, kind of thing. And but it's just you it's just easier to have people reaffirm that you're right, and then go out and make those hard decisions. So
We have definitely we've definitely gotten very complacent in this country that things are good and people are good and our country will move in the right direction. And we look at other countries and they might have dictators and dictatorial practices, and they might have, the sorts of laws that are overtly discriminatory or whatever. And we say, yeah, but we're in the US. That doesn't happen here. That's not our country. And yet so many of us, myself included, have been kind of shocked recognizing, how close is our country to being that, and how much do we have to stop taking this for granted and really fight to make sure that it's not an easy thing to maintain. I think some of us who are more progressive and liberal, I think, have in our heads, everybody's basically good. Things will basically be fine. Basically good. And our country is basically gonna. And then there's people who look for those openings and look for that complacency, and then they just bring in all this hate and divisiveness. And if we're just kumbaya, peaceful, fighting, not fighting it while they're coming and undermining what we think our country is about, they're going to.
well, and I think we're interpreting things. I've been giving a lot of thought to freedom, and when people, especially the pandemic, and we pride ourselves on all these freedoms that we have, but somewhere along the way we have lost the ability to understand that other people have rights and freedoms too, and we only care about our freedom. Guns are a great example. It's my right, the Second Amendment, it's my right. And for me, I'm thinking, well, what about my right to live in a safe gun-free society? You don't care about that. You are so focused on what you think your rights are supposed to be. We have failed somewhere along along the way to understand that everybody does have rights, but we've stopped thinking about other people's rights. I used to have this college professor, Dr. Hal Rothman, and I loved him to death. And he used to always say next to our Statue of Liberty, and I didn't get it at first. I was young, and he would say next to our Statue of Liberty, we need a Statue of Responsibility. And that was his favorite saying. He would say it all the time. And recently, especially with the pandemic and things, yeah, you have the right not to wear a mask. That's fine. But what about my right to be healthy and safe? And why aren't we thinking about that? How can you not comprehend that we're all American citizens and we owe a responsibility to each other? And I think we've really lost that. And that's why we're having a hard time, like with hate and things. Well, gay people shouldn't have rights. Why not? Because you don't like it. You think it's only about you. And we've really lost that somewhere along the way, and that worries me a lot. It was really, I remember the day I decided to become a history major was the day that the Rodney King beating, and from that, because it really kind of set me back. Like, wow, this isn't this fallacy of that this whole country and we all have these things. We're American citizens, and I started to see that, and then I've kind of gone along, and then Trayvon Martin and George Floyd, and we're kind of waking up to the fact that all these things were behind the scenes. And like you said, our country is so wonderful and we have all these freedoms and we have all these things, but there's kind of this underlying not for everybody. We talk about white privilege. I've never been turned down. I can't understand not getting something because of the color of my skin. I just can't. And I try to.
We get pulled over, we're not afraid. Like,
I'm not terrified. Yes.
Never been afraid. Might be afraid of getting a ticket, but never afraid of anything beyond that. And even that, a lot of the time, I don't even get the ticket. It's like you get pulled over and then you talk to a police officer and then they look at your ID and then they either hand you a ticket or they say, be more safe, and they drive away. And that's what we expect. That's what we expect. Yeah.
That happened to me recently. I have 14-year-old twin boys and they're just goofballs. And I got pulled over. And so they're in the back texting dad, mom's a criminal, blah. And I was laughing and I couldn't stop laughing. And so the police officer comes up to the car and I have tears running down. Like, it was one of those, I felt like I was in high school again, when you can't stop laughing. The teacher wants you to stop laughing. You can't stop laughing. My boys were laughing and the police officer was laughing, and he didn't end up writing me a ticket. And he said, I tell you not to tell your husband you got pulled over, but I think that ship has sailed. And we were all drove away laughing. And then I stopped the car and I said to my boys, this is if we were a Black family, this would have turned out way differently. If a Black woman had been giggling hysterically that she was getting a ticket, she would have been pulled out of the car. She would have been, sobriety test, and was she high? And it got me just thinking. And so I talked to my boys a little bit about it, but there's two Americas, and I never, until I became a history major and I really started paying attention to things, I never knew that there was another America.
Right.
I never knew that people didn't celebrate Christmas. I never, going through high school in a fairly white community, everybody celebrated Christmas. What do you mean? Or I knew nothing about Islam. Even going through college, I knew nothing about other religions. It took me seeking it out. And so many people, I guess, aren't willing to seek it out. As soon as 9/11 happened, my students had questions. I bought books. How can I answer the questions? But the majority of the Americans just would have preferred to hate Muslims instead of trying to learn about the religion, and that not all Muslims are terrorists, and not all, it's just easier to go with status quo in our country. And there's a whole nother country that we live in. And I don't live in that country, and I do my best to understand, but I will never, 100% understand. I can be sympathetic and I can be empathetic and I can do my best to fight that. But if I had been a Black or a brown woman, that moment would have gone completely different. I wouldn't have even been laughing. I would have been terrified.
Right. That's you wouldn't have had that ability to laugh, because you could laugh because you weren't worried. And that's it. I mean, and I had the same. I mean, I grew up really pretty. I mean, in high school, I was very interested in other religions, so I attended a lot of other faith services with friends. So I did kind of have a grounding in different religions, but for the most part, my first husband was in the army. We moved all the time. I wasn't, I was a homeschooling mom. I didn't have a lot of exposure to the outside world, and I was fully I was aware of white middle class America as the world. And it was when I became a teacher after my divorce, and I was in my mid 30s, and that was when I talked to my students. And I remember in 2008 when President Obama was elected, and I remember the halls of my school, there were jubilant. I mean, I was extremely happy. I was a huge Obama supporter, still am, but the jubilant kids. And then the really angry, like really furious, and there were all sorts of really hateful incidents against our Black students. And I'm like, really? Like, and that plus I started a lot of conversations with my students at that point. And my students would tell me, and I was like, look, I was blind to a lot of what's going on. Can you share your experiences with me?
Yeah.
How can I help you? And they would be like, well, it's all over. And I'd be like, it is. And I saw it blatantly after the election. But a lot of the time, I think something's all over, but it's quietly done. It's microaggressions, it's little things. So if it's not directed at you, it can be easy not to see it.
Yes.
And you have to out. You have to search it out. Like once I realized it was there and I wasn't seeing it, it was very similar. I was telling my students, tell me your experiences, share your experiences with me. Even now, with the LGBTQ rights, I will have people who say LGBTQ people, they have rights. No one's taking their rights away. Someone said that to me just the other day. I was in the office talking with someone running for a local office. And I was talking about the Don't Say Gay law and how the LGBTQ people are feeling as though their rights are being marginalized or taken away. And someone walking up was like, well, they have rights. What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with their rights. Their rights are fine. And I didn't get into it there. It was the office, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like,
yeah.
What you might look at, and firstly, a lot of their rights are being removed, like the rights of some kids to play sports and their rights to talk about their families in school, and other things are actual rights that are in question and in doubt. But then there's also the fact that when there's just this climate of anti-you legislation out there, that inhibits your just right to feel like a safe and secure member of society.
Yes.
And it's like it's more vague and it's more ephemeral, but it still is. We all talk about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, we're taking away a lot of that from people just by taking away acknowledgement of who they are and who they love and their family structure, and just the right to let them live the way they want to live, not doing any harm to anyone. And like you said, I think people doing that look at their own, I have a right to live in a country that doesn't have LGBTQ people. I don't even understand what right they think they're enforcing, taking away these other people's things.
Yeah, well, you see it on, it's not, I remember the first time I saw it on social media, it's like, it's not pie. Them getting more is
right.
Not you getting less, but that's how they think of it. If they get more, what am I going to lose? And I think that's where we're kind of at. I saw that on social media one day and I thought that was just hysterical, but because I think that's their attitude. I'm going to lose this, but it's, and I until I started looking at it more, and the Obama election too was, I can't, I had people once Trump got elected say to me, well, I had to live under Obama. I had to put up with it for the last 8 years. And I'm like, what did you have to put up with? And they can't answer your question. They just can't. There's no answering that question.
Having a Black president, they can't say that. Right. Yes. They can say that. But that's what.
Well, but they're saying that, and
right. Right, exactly. They can't say those words, but everybody knows that's what they mean.
Yes, yes, they can't believe we have a black president. How did it come to this? What's going to happen to me now? And I do think that we have, when they elected Obama, I was naive, and when Obama was elected, and I thought we've really made huge strides in our country. Like, I
Right.
can't believe this is happening, and I was naive in that thought completely, because I it wasn't like, oh, racism's over. I never thought that, but I thought we're heading in the right direction. But what that did for so many people was put fear in them that they were going to lose something, that they were convinced, that this election, they lost to something. And they didn't, but they still don't know what they lost. If you ask them, what did you lose by that? And they still can't explain it to you.
The primacy of white America is what they're losing. The primacy of white Christian value, white people with Christian values being the dominant voice in America is what they're losing. And that's what they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose. They're afraid. What's going to happen to us as white people if people of color start having a say in our government and our country, and if we're not suddenly in control? What's going to happen to males if women start having a say and they're not completely in control? What's going to happen to Christians if non-Christians, to straight people if LGBTQ people? It's the desire to preserve the power dynamic that has existed in this country since its existence, and which has been being chipped and crumbled away at.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, they're just afraid of that.
They can't even explain it, though.
No,
the problem.
They can't explain it like that, so they have to make all of these people enemies. They can't explain it in that sense, so they have to make people from other countries enemies, here to take our things, or criminals, or non-Christian, or heathens, or corrupting our children, or or terrorists. Everyone who's other has to somehow be demonized as an enemy, so that they have an excuse to keep them down, instead of acknowledging that it's just that they want white male Christian dominance. They can't say that. So instead, it's why everyone else is an enemy. And then they get the people who just like the thought of yelling and having enemies to back them up. And then and I don't think everyone who supports the Republicans are racist and do have these, but enough of them do that then that gets emboldened. This is enough for a whole other conversation.
I know. I was going to bring it back around to our gay community. Is, I hear this all too often. Well, they're going to make our kids gay, and they're going to convert our kids, and and if they're raised, if they have gay parents, they're going to be gay. And I'm like, everybody that I know that is gay had straight parents. I hate to tell you this. Where do you think this is coming from? And it's a fear. It's a fear. If we give gay people more rights, then it might make me gay. And I can't fathom that, but I think that's kind of the back of their head. Like, they're going to try and change my sexuality, and they're going to try and change this. And
weird, because I don't know. I have gay friends, I have transgender friends, and if someone was to say, hey, Laura, you're my friend and I'd like you to be gay now, I'd be like, well, I am your friend and I appreciate your choice, and I am not gay. And it's like, I've never felt this desire, well, hanging around with gay people, maybe I'm gay. I think the people who feel that are people who are actually gay, and then being around gay people makes them realize.
It might make them have to admit that.
This makes sense. This is who. Yeah, no, I have had a really nice time talking with you, and I have.
Yeah, me too.
I thank you so much for doing this.
Sure. So I hope I answered or helped, or
I think you were great. A lot of insight, a lot of raw emotion for your students, which I think is a good thing for people to hear, because it's the students needing the voices. And so thank you.
Yes, no, I tell my kids, it's like, I guess, like hugging. I hug my students, and everybody says you shouldn't hug your kids. I said, why? If they need a hug, I'm going to give them a hug. If they need a supporter for the community, I'm giving them that support. These are kids. They're not, these are kids. And no matter what their struggles are, we have to keep that in mind. And someone has to be there for them, because as with my young man who, was prom queen, his family was not there for him. We could get into the whole conversation about suicide rates and things like that. And if I could do anything to bring those down, I will. and I love my kids. And that's part of the reason why I'm becoming a school counselor, is I feel like I can be effective that way too. Once I started teaching psychology, I had to tell my students, I'm a teacher of psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but they just still kept coming to me. They still kept talking to me. And like, well, maybe I'll go get an office and we'll sit down and I can talk with them one-on-one. And even then, I'm not a therapist. I would be a school counselor, and I can give them resources and guide them. But it's just these kids, even my kids that are filled with hate, I try and, hey, give them someone to talk to help them see another way. There's a reason they're filled with hate for other groups. And if we shun them and we don't try and understand them, that's only going to push them farther towards hate. And every kid is welcome to come into my door and say what they want to say. And I will help guide them. Because like I said, if we turn off these kids that are filled with hate, we're not doing them any service at all. We are doing a terrible disservice by saying, I don't want to understand you. My goal is why do you feel this way? Why do you hate other people? And they have a voice with me too, because they deserve to be heard as well. Maybe I don't like what they're saying, but there's a reason they're saying that. And that's my goal, is to figure out why they're saying that and then how I can help them through that hate. So every kid deserves to be heard, whether they're gay, whether they're, again, there's reasons for things. We have to spend more time understanding the reasons why these kids, and why adults hate, why they hate other groups. We do need to take a step back. It's not enough to say, well, they're a horrible person and they think this. What led them to that type of thinking? And so that's another one of my goals. Every kid is welcome to talk to me regardless of their views. I won't judge them. I'll just ask them why they feel that way and what led them to that point. And hopefully they can see another way instead of hating. So hate will eat you up inside. It's, I can't imagine anybody at these hate rallies being like, yeah, my life's great. I love the way that I am. They're just so filled with hate. They can't see that there's another way. So anyway,
that was perfect.
Yeah.
You can give any of my contact information to anyone you think might want to speak with me. You don't even have to ask me first. Phone number, email, just have them identify themselves through you, and just all know who I'm talking with. But so I tell everyone, I'm like, and also if anything else happens, if you just want to do this again, I've got a few people I've spoken with who's like, yeah, I'd love to talk with you again. And the conversations, I think, just keep going, and they're interesting, and there's a lot to be said. And I do some podcasts where I'm just kind of talking, but the conversations are the best, because they really, I have so much knowledge in my head, and everyone out there has so much more knowledge, and it's a way to just bring it all together. I'm arranging to speak with a few healthcare providers who can talk to the need to provide care for transgender kids, both psychologically and physically. I'm arranging to speak with members of the faith community who will talk to how you can be Christian and also be LGBTQ, or be Christian and be accepting of your kids.
Yes.
So I'm definitely, another thing is, if you can think of anyone else who's someone who's a medical provider, a faith provider, anyone who's in that community who helps these kids. I know that people at FSU, where I'm running my MSW, are going to get me contacts for, mental health professionals who can speak to the need, and professors who can speak to the need, because, I want both. I want it to be a site where kids who come upon it can hear other kids' voices and recognize, okay, that they're going through what I'm going through. And they're kind of like me. but also where parents might hear it and say, oh, okay, well, this is a minister who says it's not evil. Maybe it's not evil. I mean, I know some aren't reachable, but some might be borderline, and hearing something might be helpful. So
A lot. I know Episcopalian is much more open to, at least that's what I've encountered. It's usually my Episcopalians that are far more open than some of my other really conservative communities. I went to high school with a girl, and she's very, very religious. She put up something and about very anti-gay, very anti, and something had happened, and she put up, "We're winning," and I was like, "What are you trying to win? I don't understand this. Explain it to me." And she just ignored me after that. I said, "Please explain me what it is you think you're winning. I really want to know." And to hear again, because I that's who I am. I want to know why you feel this way. I'm very much about the why. How did you come to this conclusion that you were losing something? But I definitely think that I know this young man, my transitioning young man, would be thrilled to talk to you because he wants his word and his message out there that this is, he was on such a dark path.
I'm especially looking forward to talking with him, and you can share this with him because I have a student who discovered over the past couple of years, had some, a lot of struggles, and discovered that he was trans, and came out at school and to friends, and then was recently outed to his parents, and his parents are very religious, and now they're sending him to conversion therapy.
Oh, no. That is such a, why would you do that?
And then now hearing that he's feeling so conflicted and so non-approved and I don't know. It's
and I don't understand parents that would rather have their children live incredibly unhappy to fit their views than to accept their child for who they are and be just thrilled that their children are happy. And that breaks my heart when I hear those stories. And then you have this other young man who's been so supported by his parents. And so I'm gonna text him through my teacher texting app as soon as we end here. So
I need to end anyway because I need to go to, speaking of this, there is a Brevard Say Gay rally that Equality Florida and a lot of other groups are holding, and I need to leave for that in about 20
terrific.
minutes. So I'm excited. So look and see, maybe it'll make the news. And it's a rally and a march, and we're going to march over the causeway, and hoping lots of people come. But I will definitely, I'll reach out when it's done, and then send you the link, and then obviously, give him, anyone else, my information, and I'll reach out to you at some point in the future and see if you just want to talk a little bit more, and that'd be great.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So, all right. Well, it was terrific meeting you. Thank you for reaching out. And I'm happy to talk at any point. So,
okay. All right.
All right. Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for listening. And for more information on this topic and to hear other podcasts, visit creatingsafeschools.com or search for Creating Safe Schools wherever you get your podcasts. As always, stay safe, be kind, love your kids the way they are, and have a great day.